Hello, John Talley here with Partzilla.com, and welcome back to our next installment on our 2018 Honda Grom build. Now today we're going to be focused in on the intake system and the exhaust actually. We're going to change out the throttle body, we're going to put in a high flow injector, we're going to have a high flow air filter, and then all that's going to be funneled out through a new exhaust system. Now this is part 2 of 3 if you want to loosely call it the engine build. Now when we get to part 3, that's when we'll deal with the air fuel management. The neat thing about this one, when we're through building it, we're actually going to give it away. So if you would check the link in the description below, it'll carry you to a landing page where you can enter to win. But if the contest is already over, why don't you leave us a little note in the comment section and tell us what machine you'd like to see me modify and then us give away. So that being said, let's head over and get started on this one. So the goal here over at the teardown bench is to make this resemble what came off. So we're going to start off by transferring over the idle air control valve as well as the throttle position switch. They are held in place with Torx screws, and it's a T25. So we'll start off with our throttle position sensor. See if we can gently pry up on this. There we go. Then just transfer it over. It just bolts back in place. Now there is no adjustment on this one. I've seen on other units like TRX 420 where this is actually slotted and you have to dial it in by taking a resistance measurement. Evidently on the Grom, that is not the case. One location, period. Now since we're over on this side, let's go ahead and grab the air fuel or the idle fuel mixture screw. Now we're just going to transfer that in. We're going to lightly bottom it out and then back it back out 2 turns. All right, that's bottomed. 1, 2. Next, let's go for the idle air control valve. And that was a T25 as well. Now, who would have thought so many years ago, a simple little mini bike would have all this complicated stuff on it now. Guess I'm really showing my age, huh? Well, the basic design of a mini bike, when you think back to a QA50, it just had a simple carburetor on it, and now here we are, fuel injected and throttle position sensors and everything else of a modern machine. Now let's go ahead and mount the throttle body to the actual intake. Get our O-ring. I'm just going to sit in like this. And we're just reusing the 2 8mm head bolts that came out of the OEM. The original, that is. Now I believe we need to get that bracket over here. And compare these two. Tell me that ain't going to be pulling some more air. Big difference. Now all these pieces, when they all come together, it's going to be nice. We're going to go ahead and put this little spacer in place. Now you've got these 3 threaded areas here, and if you have the stock injector going back in, you just use those 2. But ours is just going to use the single one in the middle. Now let's get our adapter kit and get our high flow injector in there. Now one note, with this particular setup on the 2018, the input was going to interfere with the plug going to the idle air control valve, so I just heated it up a little bit and bent it up enough to clear it. Wasn't in the instruction book, but that was my way around it. Now let's work on our injector. Now this one actually has an O-ring around the bottom, so you will not be using this other rubber O-ring, if you want to call it that, because that is actually made for the stock setup or the stock injector. Now we need to set up our adapter on top of our injector. That goes in there, and then this little clip slides in to hold it in place. Now we'll take this assembly and push it into the intake, and you should hear a click once that O-ring seats properly. Yep. Now, put in this other 5mm hex, and it'll hold the injector in place. Now, if you're looking at it from the side, what I did was modify this angle, because before it was just sitting straight, and there's no way that plug would have been able to clear. So just bend it up a little bit. That should give us enough clearance. We've pretty much got it together. Now what we need to do is adapt this down. So you've got this length of hose and then this brass adapter. Now let's wrangle this hose onto the end of that adapter. What I'm doing here is just pre-stretching it a little bit so they don't give us much room, because this is actually too large compared to the one that came off. Well, that is some type of tight fit there. So we just need to get the clamps on, then we'll be ready to install. The chances of this actually blowing off are almost zero without the clamp, but we'll go ahead and put it on there anyway. So I think it's got right at 48 psi from the fuel pump in the tank. Last but not least, we have an adapter to go on our injector. All right, let's get it bolted up to the machine. The arrangement they have here is gasket, spacer, then another gasket, and then the intake itself. So you just sandwich them together like this. Stay. This all goes together using the bolts that we're holding it down to begin with. When you're doing this other side, don't forget your little bracket that's going to hold the airbox in place. Yeah, that forward bolt that was in place doesn't want to go now, so we had to put in a shorter one. Let's make a few connections now. Throttle position, intake air, fuel injector. There we go. Now we can go into our fuel line. Just push in and that should let it go through. Oops. Made a little boo-boo, guys. I actually put the adapter in backwards. So we're going to need to remove it from the hose, flip it around, and then reinstall it. Through the magic of editing, this just got spun around and reinstalled like it's supposed to be. Now, there we go. We're going to add in a zip tie just to hold it in place up top along that frame spar and harness. All right, guys, so we've got our intake mounted, we've got our new injector, our new throttle body. It's ready to go. So let me go grab the exhaust and we'll get started on that. Let's start off by installing our studs for the exhaust manifold, and the best way I know to do that is to take a couple of nuts and just have them face each other, lock them down, and then you can drive it in. So let's get this little plumbing puzzle put together. Let's take your header and go ahead and put it into the mid pipe like this. And they want you to use this bolt with this washer, and it's supposed to go through here and then go into this existing pickup point where the other exhaust was mounted. That is not going to make it. So that is a little too short. I'd say by about 10 millimeters. So I'm going with a little bit longer bolt. This is theirs versus mine, so it can bridge that distance. Hopefully you have one of these in your extra bolt pile, as I do. And at this point, put your exhaust gasket in place. Now we're going to lift it up. Now you want to use the bolts that came off the stock exhaust system. So we've got it loosely in place. I'm going to jump over on the other side and stretch this spring in between the head pipe and the midsection. Now we're going to put on the actual muffler, and because we are using a different foot peg set from Driven Racing, We have to adapt it a little bit to get it to fit, because we're actually going to be a little bit short when it comes to coming out to the mount for the muffler itself. So I'm just adding in a spacer to accomplish that, and then I bought a longer bolt to go all the way through. Just when you start modifying things, this is what you run into, and you just have to figure out a way around it. Welcome to the world of modifications. I think that'll do. Plenty of clearance in between the swing arm, this bolt, and the muffler itself. So now I think we can start to actually tighten everything down. Let's start up at the head pipe first, get it snug down. After you've run the bike for a while, you may need to come back and retighten these. As the head and the exhaust gasket expand and contract, it may develop a little bit of a leak and just needs to be tightened back down so it doesn't burn through the actual gasket that's up inside. Now let's get that mid mount. Last but not least, the rear. And we have one more spring to install. It's not as if this is going to jump apart, but we want to go ahead and install the spring. Now there's one thing left to do. All this nice clean stainless steel has not been heated up yet, but there's fingerprints all over it. So if we run it right now without cleaning it, those fingerprints are going to actually get embedded and turn up being blue, and we don't want that. So we're going to get some contact cleaner and a towel and wipe those down to where it is going to be ready for the first start. So now let's turn our attention to installing the airbox and the new filter. With a larger throttle body, we of course have to adjust to it going from the airbox that we're going to use. So we're going to have to modify our existing airbox to get the new tube into it. As you can see, it's much larger. So let's get this taken apart, get the old tubes pulled out, then using a Dremel tool, a burr tool, I'm going to enlarge them to where they fit correctly. Just for kicks. Look at your surface area, one compared to the other. I believe that's going to flow a little bit more air, which this machine is going to need. So let's start by getting this tube extension out of the way. And of course that's melted in place, so I'll tell you what, we'll just grind that off, then that should release it. If you decide to grind like I did, just make sure you get all of the shavings out. We don't want to pull that into the engine. So we don't damage the intake air temperature while we're doing all this. Let's go ahead and remove it and put it to the side. And then we'll work on breaking that glue loose. Not going to be that tough. No glue on the second one. Now all we have to do is make both of these fit there and there. Now what they call for is this opening to be 40.5 millimeters. What I'm going to do is use my caliper to find a socket with a diameter really close to that. A 30 millimeter socket is right at 40 millimeters. So that's going to be as close as I can probably get. So what we'll do is lay it there, scribe it with a sharp point, and then hand cut it. This doesn't have to be absolutely exact. Let's do a test fit and see what we've got. I'm liking that. Pretty sure I've got it upside down, but fortunately I took a picture before I removed the other one so I can get it back at the same angle. Now for the 50 millimeter, we're actually going to look at a 36. It is 50.1 winner. Let me do a little housekeeping, and then we'll get going. All right, according to my phone, this one needs to sit about right here, and then the intake is about right there. The final say-so is we'll hold it up to the machine and see if it correlates. So now that we've got it pointed in the right direction, what I'm going to go back and do now is push in on it all the way around and little by little get in some RTV sealant just to make sure we've got this sealed up properly, because that's the most important one. Very important that we keep any other particles from making it past where these two join together, because that goes straight into the engine. I think that'll do. All right, let's get our intake air temperature back in. Now, Koso sends two different foam filters that can be used inside of the air cleaner adapter. I'm going to go with the tighter one, the one that's going to be more aggressive as far as filtering everything out. But before we install it, I'm actually going to open it up and put a light coating of oil on the foam. The combination of the foam with a little bit of oil, that will block out the majority of dust and particulates that are trying to get in. Going to use a little bit of PJ1 foam filter oil, and I want it on the side that the air is going to draw through, because I don't want to overcoat it. That should do. Not absolutely necessary, but too many years on a motocross track makes me very leery of not oiling a filter before you put it in. Now we're going to use the longer screws that Koso sent to mount the outside cover back on. All right, let's see if we can wrangle this back on there. Go ahead and loosen this stuff back up and dip it down enough to where we can get it in there. There she is. Now let's go ahead and get that clamp loosened up and get it over the intake on the throttle body. Make sure it's on there evenly. That should do it. Go grab our upper bolts and go ahead and get the top of the airbox mounted. Just a 10mm on either side. All right, let's work on those throttle cables next. So what you want to do is put in your return side first and just tighten it all the way down. And then when you're doing the pull side, you want just a little bit of slack that you have to bring in before it starts to open up. So just a little bit of slack just right here, and then tighten it down. And make sure that it opens all the way up on its own. Yep. That's against the stop. That's set. Let's go ahead and get our cover back on. We need to get the tank breather line routed back where it started. And then we have the crankcase vent line that actually goes into the backside of the airbox. All right, guys, before I do my typical outro, I need to show you a change I decided to make on the intake system. Once everything had been put back together, I'd never addressed the evap canister and the purge control valve. Now, there's a lot of people out there that just take the system and bypass it. Well, that's not the way I wanted to do it. I wanted to just modify and enhance the engineering that came from Honda and not eliminate anything. So what I decided to do was actually cut into the factory intake far enough to where I could remove that brass nipple vacuum. Then there's a location on the Koso unit where you can see, well, that's where it should be. So I drilled it out, transferred it over to the new unit, and then put it back together. Well, all right, guys, that's pretty much going to wrap up this video, but we are nowhere close to actually finishing up this project. All of this new equipment needs to be told how to operate, and we're going to deal with that in an upcoming video. Now, if you'd like to see that video, why don't you hit that subscribe button? That way you will be notified when we cut it loose. And once again, I want to mention that we are actually giving this one away. So if you would, check the link in the description below, and you can enter to win this exact machine. Listen, if you have any comments or questions, why don't you go ahead and leave them in the section below, and I'll do my best to answer them. Listen, we just want to say thank you for shopping here with us at Partzilla, and we will see you in the next video. Y'all have a great day.